Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with Camilla Turner, Chief Political Correspondent at the Telegraph, and Liam Thorp, Political Editor at the Liverpool Echo. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. Welcome to you both. So let's see what's on some of these front pages. And The Guardian leads on this upcoming meeting between Prime Minister Truss and Richard Hughes of the OBR. The headline, PM holds crunch talks with watchdog over fiscal chaos. The Eye has more on the market crisis, warning of a Tory wipeout after a new poll suggests more than half of voters would back the Labour Party in a general election. And this record poll is also featured on the front of the Metro, pretty starkly. The headline, Labour lead Tories by 33 points, the party's largest lead in almost 3 decades. Economic turmoil also covered by the Telegraph, with a focus on benefit payments, which are set to fall despite Liz Truss's attempts to stem the bleeding. Here's the Times with a similar lead. Their headline, Defiant PM set to curb benefits to fund budget. The Mail also has the story and the government's plan to push forward with the budget despite significant backlash. And the Express goes with the peaceful death of the Queen. It's on the front of their paper as new details emerge after the release of Her Majesty's death certificate. And The Sun features a story about the ex-partner of TV presenter Fern Britton. And the Daily Star warns of robot Armageddon, just what we need. Their headline, Science Friction, warning of unknown dangers of AI robots. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. And so we're joined tonight by Camilla Turner and Liam Thorp. As I say, welcome to you both. Let's start then, Camilla. The Guardian front page, PM holds crunch talks with watchdog over fiscal chaos. And this is highly unusual.
Yes, that's right. The Office for Budget Responsibility, the fiscal watchdog of the UK, had been due to publish their forecast, but not until November 23rd. And we learnt today that they announced that the Chancellor has actually asked them to bring this forward and published a draft in early October. So this is a move that I think is quite clearly aimed at trying to reassure the Conservative Party's own MPs about the economic forecast as a result of the mini budget that, of course, has caused turmoil in the markets and set a wave of sort of lack of confidence through the British economy. And this Guardian story concentrates on a meeting that Liz Truss is going to have with the head of the OBR to discuss this draft. Quite an unusual move, but clearly just showing that we're in this really unprecedented period of economic turmoil. And the government not only want to reassure the markets and get things to calm down, but also want to try and reassure their own backbenchers and bring them on side and convince them not to rebel against some of these measures they've got.
Yeah, and Liam, I guess the question is whether the meeting leads to anything.
Yeah, and also whether it's too late. I think as one government insider told The Guardian, it's a bit like trying to read the manual after you've broken the item already. You know, that this is the OBR that was essentially sidelined by Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. Saw a story from Faisal Islam at the BBC. He said back 9 days ago or so that the OBR were there. They had a draft plan ready to give Kwasi Kwarteng on his first day. They were ready to offer their forecasts alongside the mini budget, but he didn't want that because it's all about this idea of tearing up the orthodoxy. It's the same reason that they got rid of the permanent secretary, and the whole thing is massively, as Camilla says, spooked the market, and now they're scrabbling around desperately trying to get some kind of certainty. But it doesn't look good, does it? It looks like they're desperately sort of chasing their tail, trying to just restabilize the markets as much as they can. But for trying to get that level of confidence back after such a horrendous shock to the market will be very, very difficult. And I'm not sure that they have the team around them that's capable of doing that. It's not a very experienced team.
Yeah, it's a good point. And Camilla, your paper goes with benefits hit as PM tries to stem the bleeding. A number of papers talk about this. Welfare payments to fall in real terms amid warnings of austerity drive to balance the books.
Yes, so this is picking up on some research today by the Resolution Foundation think tank, which points out that working families are going to be £1,000 a year worse off if benefits don't rise with inflation. And of course, we've got this rampant inflation at the moment going up and up. Liz Truss has written to government departments telling them they all need to rein in their spending and make cuts throughout their departments. So on the one hand, we've got inflation cutting into the government's existing budgets, and on the other hand, they're being told to keep well within these spending limits. So what we're clearly going to see here is cuts to public services and potentially cuts to benefits as well, at least in real terms. And the article points out that council leaders are talking about cuts to leisure centres, to adult social care, to roadworks. So all these sorts of public services that we need are going to be scaled back. And it says we're potentially going to see cuts to public funding on the scale not seen since the austerity years of George Osborne. So that's really quite a significant move by the government, all in an attempt to shore up markets, but clearly at quite a big cost.
Yeah, Liam, the Mail, clear echoes of Thatcher here. Truss, I'm not for turning. The question is, will she be able to hold out, do you think?
Well, I mean, it really depends on the mood of Tory MPs who seem absolutely terrified. People describing it as a, swear words that I probably can't repeat on Sky News. So it's how much time she has. She didn't have that much space on the political scene in the first place. If you remember, it was only about 50 MPs that actually backed her for the job. It was obviously the members that got her over the line. So she hasn't got that broad support in the party anyway, and she couldn't have got off to a worse start. Just to pick up on what Camilla was saying there, it does make me very angry, to be honest, when we're going into a cost of living crisis that is basically going to be people on benefits, the lowest earners, the most vulnerable and desperate people who are essentially going to be paying for both tax cuts for the rich and for the disastrous chaos that has been wrought on the country by this government. I live in an area with large levels of deprivation that has seen brutal cuts to public services, to council services. There is nowhere left to cut. You can't cut the NHS anymore. People are dying in ambulances. Can't cut councils. They've got no money left. The justice system's a complete mess. This is Liz Truss's mistake, and she needs to own it, not the people of the country.
Yeah, and Camilla, I mean, if Tory MPs were worried about this, they certainly will be after this poll. Labour lead by 33 points. That's a staggering lead.
Yes, this is a poll that's been picked up by a lot of the front pages for tomorrow, an absolutely huge lead for Labour, which means if there was a general election now, they'd win an incredibly comfortable majority and virtually wipe out the Tory party. And this is, of course, only a few months into Liz Truss's premiership. Normally, a new Prime Minister gets a sort of bounce in the polls, a bit of confidence, a bit of excitement about their new regime. But in fact, it's been the total opposite with these polls showing this huge Labour majority if we were to have a general election. And I think this poll is just the latest thing that's really spooked Tory MPs who are already really feeling kind of under the quash from their constituents, angry about the economic situation, about the mini budget. I spent all day today speaking to disaffected Tory MPs who are furious about what's been happening with the economy. At least previously, the government could sort of blame it on Ukraine, blame it on global forces. But all the Tory MPs are now saying is that this is a crisis of the government's own making. And clearly, we can already see a direct result of that in the polls.
OK, Camilla, Liam, thanks very much indeed. Coming up, an extract from the Queen's death certificate has been released showing she died of old age. We'll discuss that next. You're watching the press preview with me once again, Camilla Turner and Liam Thorp. Let's go back to The Guardian. Putin set to annex parts of Ukraine today. And, well, Liam, I mean, it's just another tawdry attempt by Putin another land grab. There'll be celebrations. He's going to make a speech. There's going to be concerts in Red Square. I mean, will the Russian people really fall for it, do you think?
You know, I think he's been this special operation, as he call it, but let's call it what it is, this bloody and disgraceful invasion. He's been trying to keep as much of that as possible away from the Russian people. He's very worried about he's always worried about his poll ratings, which are really starting to slump now, particularly because he's now obviously being forced to try and desperately draft people who simply do not want to fight. We've seen huge numbers of people trying to escape the country because of that. And now we've got these, you know, let's call them what they are, sham referendums. What was it? Something like 99%. One of them came in at which would obviously never happen for these regions: Kherson, Luhansk, Donetsk, and Zaporizhia. What it is a desperate but a dangerous escalation of matters, because he is getting increasingly cornered. We know Ukraine have fought back and won huge amounts of territory, and they are still winning back territory in those same regions that have wrongly just voted for to be part of Russia. What it will mean, though, is when these fake treaties are signed, they will obviously class that as Russia, even though it isn't, and therefore any continued fight back from Ukraine will be seen as a higher level. So it really increases the danger, but it's increasingly desperate, but it is increasingly dangerous as well.
But Camilla, it does enable him to, claim this Russian territory and say he's going to protect it with all means at his disposal, which, he suggested nuclear weapons.
Yes, this is quite a worrying escalation of the war in Ukraine. Putin annexing these 4 quite large territories in Ukraine, claiming that they're now part of Russia's sovereign territory, and saying that he'll be prepared to defend them by all means necessary. So really, he's escalating things quite a bit. There's the fear that by all means necessary potentially means using nuclear weapons. It also, this development really scuppers any potential hope there might have been for talks, for a negotiated way out of this, because of course for Ukraine, it's an absolute red line to be handing over large parts of territory to Putin.
Yeah, and just very quickly, Liam, the Queen, peaceful death of the Queen from old age, says the Express. And the death is very moving and very simple, died from old age.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people it will provide quite a lot of comfort, really, that that it certainly doesn't sound like she was suffering particularly. She was a very old lady and she'd done extremely well for a very, very old age. She died peacefully of old age, surrounded by, well, it was Charles and Anne, wasn't it, her children. I think as things go, it's a peaceful end to her life, and I think that will probably bring a fair amount of comfort for people as well.
Absolutely. Thank you both.